皆様、こんにちは。
Hello, thank you for joining the Toyota Foundation online luncheon seminar, Learning from Each Other in the Age of COVID-19, Human Mobility and the Future of Multicultural Society, 4th Seminar, Information and Institutions Number 2. In today's seminar, we are to hear a perspective on Japanese immigration and history, as well as our overview of Japan from the perspective of sending country. First of all, Sugita-san will make a presentation.
情報と制度
The title of my presentation is Information and Institution, Past, Present, and Future. I will walk you through how Japan's policies for accepting foreigners developed, and then explain the impact of these policies. The process that people from overseas go through to work in Japan starts with a local recruitment stage. After signing a contract with a sending organization, they come to Japan, work, and in some cases change jobs or transfer to another job before returning home. During the procedure, there are many things that we may not see. For example, at the recruiting stage, brokers may charge prospects higher fees, and at contracting stage, sending organization may charge more than required by local law. The selection process could be very limited in terms of job options, and the working conditions in Japan could vary. There could be various conditions and restrictions on changing jobs or transferring when problems occur. Some items are stipulated by laws and regulations of the sending country, and some by Japanese laws and regulations. However, the contents of these individual systems themselves have not been clarified. It is unclear how the procedures of the sending country are, and how the procedures in Japan are connected in the first place. Because the individual systems and how they are connected is unclear to us, there are many black-boxed areas. The idea behind this project, therefore, is to shed light on individual systems first, and then to clarify the organic relationships among them, so that if we can improve the transparency of the black-boxed areas, the self-cleansing effect will work. Japan has a history of sending out workers to other countries from the Meiji era 1868, although it is now accepting. The people who went to Hawaii to work in the first year of Meiji 1868 were very famous people called Gannemono. Since then, Japan sent out workers, which gradually became institutionalized. In 1894, the Immigration Act was enacted, and in 1896, the Immigration Protection Act was enacted. Looking at the Immigration Protection Act of that time, we can see that there were problems common to those of today, such as what kind of information was provided to recruit immigrant workers and whether there was any exaggeration on information provided. After the end of World War II, the biggest issue for Japan's immigration was how to organize the entry and exit of people who had gone abroad, including returnees of settlers from other countries and others entering Japan for other purposes. From those days until 1956, it was difficult to find a job in Japan. But with the statement that it is no longer post-war, a time of great shortage of workers and group employment began to take place. Then, in 1990, the Immigration Control Act was revised and the foundation was laid for accepting people of Japanese descent as long-term residents, as well as foundation of the technical intern trainee system. Specified skills system was launched in 2019 while still needing consideration. In summary, in the international movement of people, push factors and pull factors are often considered. And some professors point out that inertial forces are at work. Inertia cannot be suddenly forgotten when starting to create new system, as is the case with the current technical intern trainee system. The history of accepting workers in the past and the systems that exist today, including the technical training system, are impacted by inertia. Therefore, when examining systems, we must not only consider the formality, but think how it is rooted and what inertial impact is there. We need to take this into account when we consider the future, and to think of what impact the current system could have on future systems.
杉田さん、どうもありがとうござい
Thank you
ました。
very much,
では
Sugita-san.
ここで岡部さんからのコメン
Okabe-san,
トをいた
please.
だきます。
In principle, the nature of human mobility depends on the institutions that are in place. What I find interesting is that the process of institutionalization has a lot to do with security. The inertia of the system rarely has the power to break the institution, and it shouldn't happen, but I think we need to pay attention to it.
注意を払う必要があると思います。
岡部さん、どうもあり
Thank
が
you
とうご
very
ざいま
much,
した。
Okabe-san.
それでは
Next,
続きまして
let us
播
move
磨さん
on
から
to
の発表を
Harima-san's
いたします。
presentation. Let me introduce about migration in the Mekong region. In this map, the orange area is the Mekong region. It is said that at least 4 million migrant workers have moved within the region. This is still the case today. In a way, I think this is a typical region where migrants moved without any system. I think institutions and borders came after movement of people. But even with the institution, it has become a problem as their human rights are not protected and their rights have been violated in various ways. The Mekong Migration Network, MMN, was officially launched in 2003. Until then, we were limited in what we could do in the region. Since most people were basically migrating outside legal channels, we were only able to conduct limited advocacy with the accepting country, especially in this case Thailand, and also very limited on what we could do to the sending country too. However, in 2011, following the democratization of Myanmar, the role of the sending country with regard to migrant labor was suddenly openly discussed. It was difficult to even talk about migrant workers going to Thailand and Myanmar before that. The changes in Myanmar have also had a positive impact on stimulating discussions in Cambodia and other sending countries. In response, MMN has also been focusing on research and advocacy on the role of the sending country. They must play an active role in protecting the rights of migrants, and Japan can play an important role. Japan should review its policies to prevent a race to the bottom, where employers turn to cheaper labor market at the expense of workers. We are taking a bottom-up approach, so we need to create a situation where each worker is less likely to have their rights violated by having a better understanding of their rights and the laws that exist to protect them. And we want to play a role in that. Migrant workers who have had a positive experience in Japan will have a positive impact on the relationship bilaterally. The fair treatment of migrant workers will not only contribute to Japan's obligation as a member of the international community, such as the ILO, but will also contribute to the strengthening of international relations. Starting with capacity building of civil society organizations in sending countries, I'd like to improve transparency in recruitment and link it to active protection of migrant workers' rights by national ministries and agencies. I am optimistic that Japan may take leadership, but I think there are still some difficult issues. For example, if there is no money, simple regulations alone will not work. But that doesn't mean that even if we were to provide financial assistance, we wouldn't know or be able to check if it would be used for the intended purpose through legitimate channels. On the other hand, I am optimistic about ASEAN. Amid situation in Europe and the new Cold War between the US and China, I believe ASEAN will be the forebearer to maintain and develop the liberal order in Asia. Therefore, the key is how to make effective use of this framework. I don't think the issue of migrant labor is on the diplomatic agenda of the region at the moment, but I think it will depend on how much we can involve other countries in discussing issues such as migrant labor and workers'
検
rights.
討していくことができるかということに、今後関わっているんじゃないかなと思います。
I think we have a lot to learn from the history of the country that was once a sending country. We can learn from each other's history too. I feel that the people who migrated from Japan in the past had the determination to play a role in the accepting society and call attention of their work to that society. I am sure they felt that they were making a difference in that society. That relates to the current technical intern trainees too. They must be feeling that they are somehow contributing to Japanese society. We should shed more light on these people because they have that kind of spirit and feeling that they are contributing as members of society. I think we can learn a lot by having them come more into the Japanese community. In fact, historically, the Japanese community was the primary source of protection for those who migrated. The community was their primary safety net. I think there are still a lot of things to learn from the history and experience of the sending country, including reflection on whether the past Immigration Control Act may have been a bad recruiting tool, not informing appropriately at time of sending people abroad. I think it is important to disseminate knowledge to workers and the general public. One thing I would like to point out is that although NGOs, governments, and international organizations are putting a lot of energy into training and providing information before migrating, which is done in countries such as Myanmar, Cambodia, Vietnam, and other sending countries, but the information available before deciding migration is still very limited. I think we need to increase information to people at the stage of making decision to migrate as workers. There are a number of migrant resource centers where people can visit and get information if they are interested. These centers are now expanding with the support of the ILO. I think one way to expand information is to use this framework.
それでは皆様、
Thank you very much for watching today's
あり
program.
がとうございました。